All right, so Grant, I've got this deal. And they owe $64,000 on it, but they're $12,000 behind. So when I pay that $12,000, obviously, I'm only going to owe $52,000, right? Wrong. So Grant, I've got this loan that they owe $62,000 on their mortgage statement, but they're $12,000 behind. So they really owe $74,000. And when I catch up that 12, we're going to be back caught up to that 64 that they owe, right? So what's the deal? How does this work? This is one of the more confused topics in the industry because I hear it wrong 99% of the time. Now, fortunately, I've been trying to teach enough people. I'm seeing a better response at it. I'm seeing more people get to a position where they are able to understand it, but we're still not completely there. Okay, so that's what we're going to work on today. Let's take that deal. Now, if you watched the previous video, you saw me build this out right here, where we were talking about the numbers that I just threw out there, right? Somebody is behind by 12,000 and they owe 64. So when we catch up this 12, what happens to that 64? Let me ask you this. What is a payment made up of? A payment will be made up of PITI, right? We've got a principal, interest, taxes, and insurance that go into a payment. So I'm going to say principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Now, if we break each one of those things out, and I'm going to kind of keep it simple here, and we're going to say that each one of these items is worth $500. So in this payment, we've got 500 here, we've got 500 here, we've got 500 here, and we've got 500 here. That would mean that their total payment would be $2,000. Okay? Now, our seller is behind by 12,000, right? Our seller has not been making their payments for a certain amount of time. So we're going to disregard the fact that, you know, in that $12,000, if we're doing a reinstatement with a bank, that $12,000 is not only going to include the back payments, but it's also going to include any kind of fees and attorney stuff and, you know, late fees and all that kind of crap that goes along with it. It's going to include all of that. But for the simplicity of what we're doing today, I'm not going to count any of those fees. I'm not going to count attorney's crap, any of that. We're just going to act like it's only the payments that are going in there. Now, if we look at this deal and they have a $2,000 payment, but they are $12,000 behind, well, that means that they missed 6 of each of these, right? So if you do 6 months of missed payments, that is where you get a $12,000 back payment. But each one of these items, see, I told you on this last video, I don't trust myself anymore. This is one of those moments. 35, right? No! 3,000. I'm an idiot. It's like embarrassing how bad I am without my calculator. All right, so $3,000 goes into each one of these buckets. Does this make sense so far? So, if we are $12,000 behind, each insurance, taxes, interest, and principal is a bucket that is owed $3,000 each. So I'm going to ask you a very difficult question here. In payments that are made up of principal, interest, taxes, and insurance, which of those, how many of those are going towards principal? Is interest going towards it? Is taxes going towards it? Is interest going towards it? Did I say insurance over here? I should have. Principal. The only one affecting the principal is the principal, right? All of the other stuff that they've missed goes towards one of these other buckets. So when we are looking at this deal, we have to understand that these back payments are made up of buckets that are owed money. So when we see $12,000 in arrears, Some of that is towards the insurance, some of that is towards the principal, some is interest, and some is taxes. So how do you know how much is going to go into each bucket? Well, typically you don't need to get as like micro. I think micro is the right word. I never know what micro or macro, what the difference is. You don't really need to get as like deep dived in to know exactly how much is going into each one of them. Now, the answer to know how much is going into each one of them is to look on an amortization schedule and see how much was actually affecting the principal and how much was affecting the interest, and the rest would be in escrow. But typically it's going to be about 15% of whatever that number is in the reinstatement quote. That's typically going to be about the amount of money that's going to affect your principal. So in other words, on a $12,000 back payment reinstatement quote, about $1,500 to $2,000 of that might affect your principal amount. Now, as you saw in our 2 times cash rule, sometimes that can make the difference. Sometimes that little bit of cash is the difference between having a deal and not having a deal. And that's why it's important to understand that once you catch that up, there's going to be a new principal balance. But we also have to know it's not going to be just what we see on the mortgage statement minus our arrears, right? So understanding the importance of, hey, if we are catching this loan up, about 15% of those arrears are going to go towards the principal. Now, the other thing to keep in mind about that is let's look at a loan. If we have a loan where, let's just use this loan because I already have it up. If we look at our amortization schedule, right at the beginning, I'll make this a little bit bigger. Right at the beginning, on our first payment, $931 of that payment is going towards interest. But if we scroll all the way to the end, or pretty close to it, well, not all the way to the end, here at the end, look, the very last payment, only $10 is going towards interest. Why do I bring that up? Because the earlier on you are in this loan, the earlier on that this person, like the more recent that this person took that loan on that you're buying sub to, the less of those arrears are going to be affecting principal. Because more of each payment at the early onset of a loan is going towards interest. The way that these things work, let's scroll all the way back here, and I'm going to show you the amortization schedule in case you've never seen the graph before. So this is what an amortization schedule looks like. So what we can see here is that if you are looking all the way, this blue line right here, at the beginning, all of the payment, 100% of it, as I cut myself off, I'm just going to leave that in there. Why not? 100% almost is going towards interest. Barely anything is going towards principal. But as time goes on, you see that more and more and more of this payment is going towards the principal until payment 300, or 297, I should say. Payment 297 is that equilibrium. That's the first payment in which you're paying as much principal as you are interest in the loan. So if you get somebody calling you who took a loan out 2 years ago and is now behind and they want you to catch them up, understand that very little of those arrears are going to affect your principal. But say they took their loan out 22 years ago. Each one of their payments is banging away at that principal, right? So if they're 6 months behind, maybe 80% of your arrears are actually going to affect your principal balance, right? So it can change, not super drastically, unless it's a super drastic answer, like first year versus 22nd year. If you're in that like first to 8-ish years, about 15% is going to be what's going towards your principal. And that's sort of what we've seen from a practical stance, okay? So that should help you understand a little bit more about the 2 times cash rule and what's owed and the arrears and what's affecting what. Stick around, watch the next parts of the rule of thumb. We're going to talk about the 82% basis. We're going to talk about our minimum cash flow. I'll see you on that video.